It's open to questions. Whatever you'll need, please feel free to ask. No.
Thank you, sir, for
Welcome.
speaking to us. And even me, I agree with you. And as you have said that you almost 3 decades that you have been believing Jesus Christ, and so do I. Almost 3 decades that I have been believing Jesus Christ. So I'm from traditional church.
You're probably only 30 years old.
Yeah. I'm from traditional church, and my church members, we don't believe work of the Holy Spirit. Of course, we believe Holy Spirit, and moreover, Bible is a complete revelation. And especially people, those who speak about Holy Spirit or exercise about Holy Spirit power, they usually speak, you're going to face destruction or death. And people, those who don't exercise, they always bring with a joy, peace, patience. So what is the actual?
What is the last few things you said?
People, those who don't exercise.
Joy.
Joy, yeah. They always bring joy, like joy, they speak about joy, peace, patience. And what my question is, what is the actual work of the Holy Spirit? And if I don't exercise, the Holy Spirit live in me.
What is the role if you don't exercise?
Yeah.
Now, Paul does say, don't grieve the Holy Spirit. Yeah, so it's possible for us to thwart whatever the Holy Spirit wants to do within us. So that is definitely possible. Now, the Holy Spirit is there to empower you, to empower each one of us, but it has to be for the benefit of others. Yeah, we are only channels of blessing. Yeah, we recognize this right from the start. God calls Abraham and blesses him and says, through you, all the nations will be blessed, right? Because that is how our God is. He gives in order that those who have received from him can give. Yeah, freely you have received, freely give, right? I mean, that's what Jesus also said. So the same way, the Holy Spirit will empower us, but we need to use that for the benefit of others. It could be others in the church, it could be others outside the church. But I think your question was, you brought up the issue of a traditional church that does not believe in the continuing work of the Holy Spirit, right? Once the Bible was formed, it's over in that sense, right? Again, there are multiple views there. Even people there will not say that the Holy Spirit does not heal, right? Even people in that tradition will pray for healing, will pray for miracles. So it's not that they say that the Holy Spirit has stopped doing that. It's the purpose for which it was done, right? So the purpose was to attest to the apostles. And once the Bible, the canon has been solidified, there's no need for that attestation. Now, I would say, where I mentioned this, when the gospel goes to someone who hasn't heard, or in a very particular hostile region, there we still have reports of the Holy Spirit doing miraculous works and signs and all of that. Now, I wouldn't want to just discount and say, well, because my belief is this, none of that is happening. You know, because those people are in the same situation as the early church was, where they needed the attestation of the Holy Spirit. Using the fact that I have received the gospel to say that others should not receive an attestation, I think that is a little problematic.
Thank you, Pastor, for your elaborate talk, and we are very much edified. Pertinent to the talk, I'm Joshua from Vijayawada. I'd just like to know 3 brief questions of mine. What is a gift of mine to myself? That is number 1. Number 2 is, people are interpreting tongues, having to know the scriptures. Individually, one person is talking in tongues and the other is simultaneously interpreting. And I have my own doubts about those things. And the third one is, if only the church is the temple of God, then what am I? Thank you.
Okay, good. So what is your gift to yourself? I don't know whether we are rich enough to give gifts to ourselves. We are recipients of God's gifts. And those gifts could benefit us, but they're not given to benefit us. They're given so that we could benefit others. So God blesses his people so that they can bless others. Yeah, it's always like that. It is precisely, if you look at when on Palm Sunday, Jesus enters Jerusalem, goes into the temple, and he says, my temple shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples, but you have made it a den of thieves. Now, they had the marketplace in the court of the Gentiles. That's what they had set up. So they're buying and selling, which was a valid thing because people were coming from far away. You don't expect them to be carrying a sheep all the way. So they would carry money and they would buy a sheep outside, right? But they had moved this into the court of the Gentiles rather than outside the temple. So now when you move that into the court of the Gentiles can't be there anymore, right? So what you've done is you have excluded the people. So what you've done is, because you've got a valid thing to do, buying and selling of the sheep is important so that people would have the sacrifice, but you've done it in such a way that you're not allowing others to be blessed. That's not okay. You can't say, I need to be blessed, but others don't. That's not allowed. Yeah. What was your second one?
People are interpreting tongues. I have seen a few people and some people coming to my house also. And they pray for some time and all of a sudden, one person bursts out in tongues and simultaneously the other is interpreting, both in small groups and in congregations also.
Yeah, I've also experienced this personally. I personally do not speak in any ecstatic speech or anything. I've never encountered that. That it happens to me, but I have friends for whom it's happened, and I trust them enough to think that this was a genuine experience that they were having. Now, I am clueless about the interpretation because I don't know the original language, right? So I can only trust the friend who's speaking to me and say, okay, fine, that's a word from God. Now, if it is something that is totally bizarre and does not align with what we know the character of God is, then probably I would say I have a problem with that. But otherwise, I wouldn't mind accepting it and following up with it. If it's like, okay, I was faced with a decision, job A or job B or something like that, and someone, gives me a word and says, okay, this is God says you should go for job B. Okay. The worst that could happen was that I'm really not suited and I get fired or something like that. I mean, it's not like the end of the road. If he says, marry someone or not, maybe there I'll be a little more careful because that is kind of like a long-lasting thing, right? More than a job. So I'll be a little careful about that, and maybe I'll get 2 or 3 others to weigh in and say, okay, do you think this is the right word here? For a job, it's not. I mean, it's important, but it's not that important. Your marriage partner is definitely more important than. And your third one was?
Is if the congregation or the church at large is the temple, then what am I?
So okay, so it's important that so Paul uses the temple imagery in 1 Corinthians a few times. Yeah, I cited 1 Corinthians 3 where he talks, and there it is, you plural, one temple. The same thing you encounter in chapter 6, where he again does that, but there he does something different. He does, towards the end, talk about your bodies also. So he does put an individual aspect to it, where he's talking about how you treat your body and treating your body as a temple, rather than it necessarily being the same kind of temple, right? So this is where the Holy Spirit dwells. So I believe the Holy Spirit dwells in me, according to 1 Corinthians 6. It's definitely there. And therefore, I should behave in a certain way. Yeah. So that's his point there. So you are definitely the temple of the Holy Spirit, no denying that. I was trying to emphasize the communal aspects of it here. But you're right to maybe call me out on that, and I should have mentioned that as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've got two questions, sir. One, reversal. These two separate incidents, and I'm a little bit confused how these two are connected, because there, God confused the language, and we have different languages. But on the Pentecost day, God was actually fulfilling the promise which Jesus had promised to his disciples, to the believers. It is for the church, for the empowerment. And the people there understood the speaking of tongues in their own languages. So that's how they understood. My number two question is, as we look in the New Testament, Paul himself did not openly, publicly speak in tongues.
Paul didn't openly?
Openly. We don't find that incident where Paul spoke, speaking in tongues, because you emphasize specifically on the speaking of tongues, and this tongue has to be interpreted. Where at prison, we don't understand in our own languages. Somebody speaks and we don't understand, and somebody has to interpret. But most of the time, people don't understand what they are speaking. So that is bringing confusion. And sometimes it is better that we don't speak tongues at all, because if it confuse and if it not edify the church, then I think there is no purpose. So there is a lot of confusion. So here in this speaking tongues, that's why Paul, or in the New Testament, we don't see openly the churches speaking in tongues and then practicing this. But of course, there is a mention of it. So at present, how do you say that, okay, this is still applicable? Because when there is lots of confusion on this speaking tongues. Thank you.
Okay, so with respect to the second question that you said about speaking in tongues and having someone interpret, and if it's not there, it'll be confusion. I think I said we should be careful about that kind of a practice where it's I'm allowed to speak in tongues, no interpretation. Someone else comes there, and Paul addresses this in 1 Corinthians 14, where he says, someone will come there and think you're just out of your mind. You're just babbling, because the other person doesn't know what you're saying, right? So he does address that and say, okay, this is an issue. You should be careful about this, because God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, right? That's what he says. So you have to be careful about how this gift especially, because it is inherently confusing, it can cause confusion, it should be controlled more than other gifts. Yeah? With respect, so I don't know, does that address your second question? Yeah. The first question about the link between Babel and Pentecost. So remember what I said. In Babel, it starts with, the people of the world had only one language. Yeah, but the end is not that there are more languages. He confused the language of the people, not the languages. Yeah, it's not that they started speaking other languages, because that would be a wonderful miracle, suddenly new languages, right? I mean, that's not what these people who are speaking the same language were not able to communicate. So, we are speaking, I'm hopefully communicating with you right now, but if you just, I'm speaking and you're like totally blank, that would be a Babel thing, because it's a confusion. Yeah. In Acts, it's a reversal completely, where it's not just people speaking the same language and understanding. It's cosmic in nature, because it's people who are speaking different languages understanding each other. Yeah. So you are from where? Manipur. Languages Manipuri or what? Yeah, Manipur. Okay. Okay. So I can't understand Manipuri, right? But if God suddenly gifted me with that and I start speaking Manipuri to you, you would wonder, Deepak, he doesn't look like someone who can speak. That's what they said. How come these guys from Galilee? We are from Phrygia and Pamphylia and Asia and all of that. These guys, these are Galileans. How are they speaking? And you'll say, this is Deepak. He's from Kerala. How in the world is he speaking Manipuri? Right? So you'll know that something is happening there because I have no exposure to Manipuri at all. Right? So that was the sign, therefore, of complete reversal. It's not just that there is communication with the same language, but communication with multiple languages being there. So it's a reversal of that sort. Am I getting? Yeah. Okay. It doesn't make it clear like that. But if you look at the Genesis chapter 10, where the 70 nations are mentioned, and you see where they are located, most of them, and you look at the nations that are mentioned in Acts, it's covering the same region actually. They don't go further than that. So all the nations that they were aware of were in that region, and they're saying that all these are there in Jerusalem, and that is why Paul can say that he has preached the gospel to the whole world, yeah? Even though he doesn't even reach Spain, right? So it's a world-altering thing in that sense. Yeah? This side is not asking what's going on.
Since my question is related to
These are leftists, is it? Sorry.
Since my question is related to our pastor, since this is not edifying church, speaking in tongue.
Since this is not
edifying, it is not helping church. So it is good for us to stop practicing this, or it is good for us to promote it.
See, I would not
because
want.
There I came across. I was studying in some college, and some students suddenly they start speaking la 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 like this. Start speaking la la like this, and then principal scolded them and called them personally in the office, and they confessed they were just just saying otherwise. Those what they were saying was not touched by the Holy Spirit. So since Holy Spirit, the power of the Holy Spirit or speaking in tongues has been misused by many people, so it is good for us to use or stop.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to address this in a different way than directly, right? In the 14th century or so, the Portuguese came to India, and they brought their Roman Catholicism with them, and at the same time, they were going west further. Around the same time, the Spanish people were going west towards what we know as North and South America right now. Along with them went well-meaning Christians, dedicated Christian missionaries. But the people who they were going with were not well-meaning. They conquered those people, wiped them out, etc., etc. There were forced baptisms, and told the people, especially in South America, okay, now that you crossed this body of water, you are a Christian, that sort of thing. I mean, it was really ridiculous, right? Okay, you're laughing. That's what happened. So much abuse has been done. There were crusades before that. You're aware of that. John Calvin, who is a wonderful reformer, he actually supervised the killing of Servetus, who just didn't agree with him on certain points. It wasn't like, so even the towering figures that we have have blood on their hands, as it were. Yeah. But we are not going to say because of that we are not going to preach the gospel. People in the country, especially the right-wing Hindu people, would want to make us remember all the bad things of the past. This is what you guys, the Portuguese came, the French came, the British came, all of them, the Dutch came, subjected us, put us down in the name of Christianity, they would say, right? But we are not going to buy that story. Are there abuses? Yes. But because there are abuses does not mean you shouldn't be looking for the right thing either. That's why I've tried to say that Paul is very careful This he separates this gift because it can cause problems. He recognizes that, but he provides directives for it to be used properly. But before he does that, he shows that all the gifts are there for the benefit of the church. So once he has said that, now this thing, which is a very individual thing, right? Me speaking in tongues. Many of my friends say, yeah, when I pray in tongues. Like, okay, do you know what you're saying? No. So then what are you doing? You know, at some point, as Paul says, I'll pray in the spirit, but I'll also pray with my mind, right? I mean, at some point you need to break it into language you know also. You can do both. So because this is such an individual thing, I cannot exercise the gift of healing without someone to be healed. I cannot exercise a gift of knowledge without someone to give that knowledge to, because I know the knowledge, right? I mean, I know about myself. But if I have to tell you something about yourself, that's a word of knowledge. I need someone else. All the other gifts need someone else. This is the one gift that does not need anyone else. But it is for other people, and therefore it needs to be interpreted. Yeah. So I would not want to say, because there are abusers, let's throw it all out. I have never experienced that gift, but I don't want to say it's absolutely not possible.
Excuse me, sir. Yeah, I have one doubt.
All right, one from this.
Excuse me, sir.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I have one doubt.
And I just want to highlight the deficiency of today's lecture.
What's that?
The deficiency of today's lecture. And yes, what you have spoken, I accepted. I am. But I think when we speak about the Holy Spirit, we are too much focused on the corporate purpose of the church. The purpose of the Holy Spirit in the Christian community. And you brought out John chapter 14, verse 26. Corinthians chapter 12, and Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 onward. And I think when you think about what you have spoken, mostly you focus on the purpose of the Holy Spirit through these verses. But what I feel is that it's not Galatians chapter 22 is for individual persons. I mean, love, joy, peace, and all these are should be originated from individual lives, individual persons. It cannot be originated from corporate and come to what individuals. It's not. Is the Galatians chapter 5:22 for individual or corporate?
Yeah, you're right. As I mentioned earlier to the person who spoke there, I have not focused on individuals. On the other hand, the fruit of the Spirit, I cannot love without someone to love. Right away, when you say love, it's communal. I cannot be patient without someone trying to make me impatient. By myself, I'm totally patient, I'm satisfied. It is when my wife wants to do something differently, or now, or later, or that's when the impatience comes. It is communal. Yeah, joy, by myself, what is there to be joyful about? Joyful is about all the circumstances. Can I look at the world that is suffering and still have the joy that God? It is when I look at others, because by myself, yeah, okay, joy. So all of these fruit, they are actually inherently communal in nature. I cannot be generous without someone to be generous with. I cannot be gentle without someone to be gentle with. Yeah. So we think that those are individual things, but no. As soon as those words are mentioned, there is another person with whom I need to be gentle or loving or patient or peaceful, etc. You get my point? Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, I have one clarification. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I have one clarification, sir. I believe the tongues of the Holy Spirit, and I even believe that everyone are not gifted with that. But I have seen and heard in one of the churches in Kerala, the pastor is teaching the believers who had come to the church for the first time how to speak in tongues. So what do you say, sir? Like, because being a pastor, is it right to teach the believers which is not gifted to that particular person or believers? So I want
I
views
don't
and
think that
comments,
that
sir.
is the right approach to the gift. If it's a gift of the Holy Spirit, you should let him package the gift and give it rather than you unpack it first and give it. I don't think that this gift I don't think any of these gifts can be taught in that sense. Yeah, if you look at the healing accounts, Jesus, and then in the first few chapters of Acts, um, there is no standard formula for healing. Yeah, sometimes Jesus just declares something and the person is healed. Another time he needs to put his hand on the eyes and then they're healed. Other time he has to put mud and all of it changes, depends on the circumstance. Yeah. So for me, ironically, it is the people who say that they are open to the Holy Spirit in this manner who actually put him in a box. Because if I know how to teach someone how to get a gift, that means I'm manipulating the Holy Spirit. Yeah. If I am able to teach you, here, do these 12 steps, and you've got the gift of tongues, I have placed myself over the Holy Spirit. But according to Paul, it's the Holy Spirit who gives the gifts according to how he wishes, right? So any move that says I can guarantee a gift for you is inherently anti-Pentecostal, I would say. I use that word, I will say it's anti-Pentecostal.
Thank you, sir.
In our salvation, can we adjust without Holy Spirit by taking help of Father and Christ? The presence of Holy Spirit.
Can you manage with 2/3 of God? Is that what you're trying to say? Sorry, I'm a math teacher, so automatically these fractions are coming up. It is impossible to separate things like that. Yeah, when we say that, you know, the Holy Spirit is given as down payment, does that mean that there's only the Father and the Son now? Or the Son is incarnate, so he is like what in too many mysteries there. Yeah, we should not make the working, how God interacts with us, as a way of picturing how God is. Yeah. So the Orthodox theology always says that there is God in his nature, in his essence, and then there's God in his economy, how he interacts with us. Yeah. So when we say that the Holy Spirit is is a seal, I spoke right now, is a seal. Okay, what does that mean though, really? Right? It's a metaphor, it's an image. It is not trying to tell you that 1/3 of God seals everyone, 1/3 of God became incarnate. It's not trying to tell you that sort of a thing. Yeah. But so if you are saved, Holy Spirit is there. I mean, whether you like it or not. He is, as I mentioned for the earlier, he is indwelling all of us. Each of us, our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. That is automatic. That is part of the package when you believe in Jesus. There's no believing in Jesus and not receiving the Holy Spirit. I mean, Nothing just does not exist. No, why? I want to know why you're asking this. Has someone told you that it's possible? Because then we need to address these issues also. Can you, so that the others can also hear you?
If you see in world defines the Holy Spirit as a very supernatural, speaking in tongues and prophecy, and that is what the world define, that Holy Spirit does the work in this section only. But whereas Christ word for word and all.
So you're saying if you don't speak in tongues, do you not have the Holy Spirit? Is that sort of a thing you're saying then?
World they settle the Holy Spirit in just for supernatural powers like gifts and all. So many people think that without we don't believe in supernatural powers. So that's why we don't believe in Holy Spirit. So without Holy Spirit, we say.
Okay. Okay. This is an interesting one. Okay. I mentioned something in, Jesus says the wind blows where it wills. And in there, I put a small little comment that maybe we should think of the wind as the power of the Holy Spirit also. I just put it out there. Yeah. Now, for me, the way I look at it is, if you read Genesis chapter 2, God forms the man from the dust of the ground, and then he breathes his spirit into it. He breathes his breath into it. It's the same word, ruach. He breathes his breath, and the man becomes animated, becomes alive. That is teaching me, and I hope you also, that if you are breathing, it is because the Holy Spirit is sustaining you there. Because without that, you're just dust. Yeah. So the man came alive when God's breath animated him. So you are breathing now because of the Holy Spirit. Now, no one can say that, just because you haven't experienced in a certain way, therefore your faith is deficient. I mean, Paul mentions in 1 Corinthians that he speaks in tongues. I'm glad I speak tongues more than you guys. I mean, so basically he's trying to say, you think you speak in tongues, I speak more, that sort of. But then he says, I'd rather prophesy. Yeah. Now we have no evidence that Jesus spoke in tongues. We have no evidence that, that any of the others spoke in tongues really. As I told you in Acts chapter 2, it's not the babbling kind of speaking in tongues. What people would say is, tongues of angels kind of a thing, which not human languages. Those were human languages in Acts chapter 2. So I don't think most of the believers actually spoke in any, because Paul says, does everyone work miracles? Does everyone, do healing? Does everyone speak in tongues? And his expected answer is no, 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 no. Not everyone does everything. Because if everyone does everything, there is no body. That is when you can be an individual and say, hey, I've got all the gifts. I don't need you. But if I am sick and I need to be healed, and you have the gift of healing, I need to say, hey, can you please pray for me to be healed? Yeah. If you have a gift of wisdom, and I say, hey, I'm really struggling in this, can you? That's when I need you, is precisely when we all don't share the same thing. If everyone has everything, we don't need a body then. Yeah. So that's why Paul says, is the whole body legs then? Is the whole body an eye? I mean, then where is the sense of hearing and all that? It makes it ridiculous. So not everyone is going to receive any particular gift. Name a gift. There will be definitely Christians who don't have that gift. Because it is a gift only if it is not part of a promise. Please note what I'm saying. Yeah? So the promise is that we will be baptized by the Holy Spirit. Yeah, that's what Jesus says. Stay here in Jerusalem. Yeah, wait here till you receive the promise of the Father, which is the baptism of the Holy Spirit, which means every Christian is promised to be baptized by the Holy Spirit, but not every Christian is promised any particular gift. I cannot say, well, you know what, you baptized me, therefore I need this gift. No, then it's not a gift. If the Holy Spirit chooses to gift me with that, then I receive it as a gift. Yeah. So if he has chosen not to give me the gift of speaking in tongues, which he hasn't, I'm fine with it. There are times when I pray, how about now? It would be nice to experience it. It would be. Because my friends who have experienced it say it is, and I would like it. But I'm not going to be upset at him because it's not come to me. I have other gifts, I have a gift which I think I'm doing right now. I think I'm doing some kind of teaching, and I think I have that sort of gift. It's not a supernatural thing. I mean, out of all the Bible studies and sermons that I've given, there have been maybe 3-4 of them where I've had the night before, this is the message you have to, the one you were working on is wrong. So there have been like 3 or 4 of those where I know, okay, this is a supernatural thing. All my study is gone, thrown out the door, and the new message is there. So 2-3 months back, there was one occasion. So I've been a pastor now for more than 20 years, but that's what. So it's not, but regular is very mundane, not like a supernatural thing. Reading through dictionaries, reading through the Greek text, finding out words. I mean, that's what it is. It is a lot of work. Would I like if God zaps me every Saturday night with a message? Of course, that would be wonderful. But he's not going to do that, because then, I'm not doing anything. I'm not engaging my mind, right? So he wants me to use my mind also.
Can I come in, sir? Is it audible? Yeah. I want to ask, can you please explain regarding the 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 22, where it says, therefore tongues are for a sign not to those who believe, but to unbelievers. But prophesying is not for unbelievers, but for those who believe. If you could kindly explain this verse.
Yeah, so if you read Acts, as I said, Acts is an account of the milestones that the church reached. Yeah, and so in Acts chapter 2, it's a sign to those who are unbelieving, the audience, because suddenly they were speaking tongues that these guys, you don't expect Galileans to know all these other languages. They were speaking, so it was a sign for them, for the unbelievers to know that something supernatural, miraculous was happening. The next time you encounter tongues is in Acts chapter 8, where it's the Samaritans receive. Again, you have tongues there, and the Samaritans come to faith. Yeah? Then you have Acts chapter 10 with Cornelius and his group, the Gentiles. And then in Acts chapter 19, again you have one. But now note what has happened. In Acts chapter 2, it is during the festival of Pentecost where all the Jews would have gathered, because that was one of the 3 festivals they had to come to Jerusalem and offer their sacrifice. So it was mainly Jews or God-fearers, that is Gentiles who wanted to become Jews. Yeah. So Acts chapter 8, it's the Samaritans. Though the Samaritans were kind of mixed blood. Yeah. There were people from the northern kingdom of Israel who had not been deported, but then they had intermarried with those who had been settled into the northern kingdom. Yeah, so those were the Samaritans. Then you have the Gentiles. So you have the pure bloods, Jews, the mixed bloods, the Samaritans. Then you have the Gentiles who are like bad blood, whatever. Yeah. Acts chapter 19, if you read, it's just believers. Suddenly, you know what has happened. There is no way now to say that the church is Jew, Greek, or Gentile. The church is just believers. There is no way of deciding what the ethnicity is. That is the milestone that have been reached. Yeah. So it is a sign for the believers, unbelievers, because of the milestones that are being reached. So if the gospel goes to some place which has not heard the gospel right now, I have no doubt that there would be tongues and miraculous signs and all of those things, because that is perhaps what they need to be convinced. But as I said, for me, after 30 years, if I need that, if I'm going to say tonight, speaking in tongues, or tomorrow, I'm atheist. I mean, that doesn't work. Then what kind of faith do I have? What is this relationship? It can't be based on that. So tongues are a sign precisely for all the milestones that were achieved. There are only 4 occasions where the Acts mentions speaking in tongues, the ones I mentioned. Acts chapter 2, 8, 10, 19. That's it. Doesn't talk about speaking in tongues otherwise. It's not such a big deal in that way. Yeah. But the regular stuff is there. Yeah? How do you live between after you've received that? How do you now that the Gentiles have come in, how do we coexist with them in one community? So there's a conflict there, and which they resolve in Acts chapter 15. So you see all of these happening. Yeah. So what Paul is saying there is that this gift, speaking in tongues, is a sign for unbelievers because it does something that you never if you spoke in Manipuri right now, I would have no idea what you're saying. I'll need an interpreter. I need a third person. Yeah. But if God gives me the ability to understand Manipuri, or gives you the ability to speak in Malayalam, we don't need a third person. That the need for an interpreter, a mediator, has been taken away. Yes. So it's a sign that something grand has been done, and we should not minimize that. And that is for unbelievers to become believers. It's not a sign for them to remain unbelievers. Yes, that's a sign given so that the unbelievers. So we see that 3,000 people who heard messages in who knows how many languages were baptized and became believers that on the first Pentecost. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, is that okay?
Thank you, sir.
Last question, but not least.
Last from you,
Yeah.
but you don't know if others. Maybe this side is going to take over now after some time.
Time also run up, and that's why.
I don't know. I can stay longer.
So since this has been practicing, not only the speaking tongue, but also the power of the Holy Spirit has been misused from century till now. And there is a community. I do not know exactly whether that community is a classical Pentecostal or neo-Pentecostal, but there is a community.
Mhm.
Luke 12:12, they take idea from Luke 12:12 that the Holy Spirit will teach you, and you don't have to be afraid. So when they come to the Holy Sanctuary in God's house, they don't prepare message, and then they sit around, and what they emphasize is whoever get the power of the Holy Spirit will stand and speak. So is that community is right or wrong? This is the question.
You're talking about the Pentecostal community, or you're talking about the Quakers?
There are classical Pentecostal and neo-Pentecostal. So I do not know exactly which that community belong to, but till then they practice this. They come to the Holy Sanctuary blessed, and then whoever get the Holy Spirit, that person will speak. So is that right practice or wrong practice? Since we Baptists, we prepare and we,
Since we Baptists and Presbyterians and Methodists and all that, we prepare our messages. As you say, I have to read. I mean, I can't just, God has not given me that ability to just speak even with points. I have to write it all out. Yeah. So anyhow, Jesus was speaking, if they haul you to speak before governors and before the courts, then don't worry about what you are going to say, because the Holy Spirit will give you what to say. So if I am ever arrested or something, I'm not going to prepare a message. but so the context that Jesus is painting is one where your life is threatened. So don't worry about preparing messages and all that. Rely on the Spirit to give you the words to speak at that time. Does that mean that I should always prepare? I definitely should. Yeah, as I told you, I can't function without the study and preparation. As I told you, there have been a few occasions where the night before, God has told me that this is not the message that they need to hear. This is what they need to hear. And then, it's like completely different angle. But even there, I can't speak I have to sit up late in the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, still typing things out and making sure that I know what to say. Does that mean others also have to do it? Absolutely not. Yeah. I do believe that some of our traditional, let's remove the word traditional, some of our denominations, like Baptists, I'm an ordained Baptist, so I can preach, point out flaws there. Yeah. Presbyterians, most of the Protestant churches, we don't have space for silence. Yeah, where whether it is then used to break the silence because you've heard from God or not is a different issue, but just silence in general. We don't have those kind of, so I do think that these traditions that are practicing this kind of thing have something that we have lost or we have not considered important enough, that all of us just sit in quiet and just do it. I remember, what is this? When was I forget I forget what had happened, but one Sunday, the night before or 2 nights before, some disaster had happened. And in my sermon, I said, okay, I started my sermon by saying, in honor of those people who died, let us spend 2 minutes of silence. So I kept my timer here because I didn't want to lose track of time. Within 20 seconds, there's all sorts of fidgeting all over in the church. And I'm hearing that, I'm saying, can't they do silence? By the time it was a minute, there's rustling of Bibles. Like I could see people like, I need to consume something. I can't sit. And that's a problem. Yeah. 2 minutes is not that long. That's what I thought. Yeah. 2 minutes actually is quite a reasonable time to remain silent. But we can't. We don't know what to do. We want it all to be filled with. And I think we need to allow a little space for God to surprise us. Yeah? And by packing everything, we don't leave space to be surprised. So I think that is a good practice, but if it's all the time, I have a problem with that. Yeah. If you're not going to study, if you're not going to say, okay, God, you have placed me as a pastor of this church, as a whatever title you give yourself, as a leader in the church, you have put me as the person who has to speak to the church. What do you want me to say? I mean, that's basically what I'm struggling with. This is the passage that we've decided. It's not that suddenly God just says, hey, another nice passage. We planned the preaching schedule at Kristalaya Koramangala. It's all planned. I know that next Sunday, this coming Sunday, I'm preaching from Ephesians chapter 4, the first half. That's there. I have to know what from that passage does this group of people need to hear today. That's why when you preach from the same passage 2 years down the line, it'll be a different message, because that's not what this people needs to hear 2 years down the line. There'll be a different. So that struggle, I think we need to have, making some words that Jesus said as an excuse for not putting in the work. I think that's this. At the very least, it's laziness. At the worst, it's irresponsible. It was very much weighted on this side. Yeah. Okay. What's that? Pneumatology is our favorite subject. Pneumatology is your favorite subject, but not theirs, is it? Or maybe they know all of it, so they don't need to ask the questions. So, all right. Question? Okay. Done? All right. Thank you, everyone.